The courtroom was filled with silence, except for the slow tick of the clock on the wall. Everyone waited for the final hearing to begin. The judge, a calm and strong woman named Judge Rebecca Miles, entered the room with her usual confidence. Her eyes were firm, her voice steady, and her reputation was spotless. She had sent many criminals behind bars, but today's case was different. It was about a small boy found abandoned near an old gas station. Nobody knew where he came from or who his parents were. The police had brought him to court because he refused to speak to anyone, except today he had finally agreed to say something. The boy's name was Eli. He was only 9 years old, wearing a faded blue shirt and holding a small toy car tightly in his hand. His dark eyes moved around the room, full of fear and confusion. Everyone in the courtroom watched him, wondering what he might say. When Judge Rebecca looked at him, something strange happened. Her heart skipped a beat. There was something about this boy's eyes, something painfully familiar. But she quickly shook the thought away. She had a job to do. The social worker stepped forward. "Your Honor, this is Eli. He's been in our care for 3 weeks. He doesn't speak much, but he insists he remembers something important about his mother." The judge nodded. "That's good. Let's hear what he remembers." The courtroom went quiet again. Eli looked down, his fingers trembling around the toy car. His lips moved as if he wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Then he slowly lifted his eyes toward the judge. For a long second, he just stared at her, deeply, as if searching her face for something lost. Judge Rebecca shifted in her chair, feeling uneasy. Finally, Eli whispered, "You're my mother." The entire courtroom gasped. Reporters dropped their pens, officers looked at each other, and the social worker froze. Judge Rebecca blinked in disbelief. For a moment, she couldn't even breathe. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the desk. What did you just say, son?" she asked softly. Eli's voice shook as he repeated, "You're my mom." A murmur spread through the courtroom. The bailiff quickly asked for order, but the shock was too strong to settle easily. Rebecca's mind started racing. She had no children, or at least, that's what everyone believed. 20 years ago, before she became a judge, she had made a painful decision that she never spoke about again. Only one person in her life knew about it, her late husband. Her heart began to pound. Could this boy possibly be connected to that past she buried so deep? No, she told herself. It's impossible. But something inside her whispered that she was wrong. Trying to stay composed, she looked at the boy and asked, "Who told you that I'm your mother?" "No one," Eli said. "I remember your face. I saw it in my dreams. You're the lady who left me by the road." A heavy silence filled the courtroom. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Memories she thought she had buried forever began to rise, cold nights, a crying baby, and the sound of rain hitting a broken window. She had been only 19 then, scared, alone, and desperate. She had made one terrible choice, to leave her newborn child somewhere safe, hoping he'd have a better life than she could give. Now that same child was standing in front of her, calling her mom. Her voice broke as she said, "Eli, that can't be true. I think you're confused." But deep down, she wasn't sure. The look in his eyes pierced through her soul. The prosecutor stood up, trying to ease the tension. "Your Honor, perhaps the boy is mistaken. We should verify his statement with proper evidence." But Eli interrupted, clutching his toy car tighter. "This car, it was with me when I was found. There's a name written inside it, Rebecca." The judge froze completely. Her name. That toy had belonged to her late husband, who had gifted it to their baby before she gave him away. She remembered it clearly, the small red car with Rebecca scratched under it with a silver pin. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly looked away, pretending to check her papers. She couldn't let anyone see her break down. She was a judge, a symbol of justice and strength. But right now, she felt like a frightened woman facing her past. The courtroom waited for her response. Every camera focused on her face, every reporter ready to write headlines about the boy who called the judge his mother. Rebecca took a deep breath. "Eli," she said softly, "I want to know everything you remember. Where were you before the police found you?" Eli looked down again. "I was in a house. It was dark. There was a woman there who told me my mom would come for me one day. She said I was special. But then she disappeared. I walked for hours until I found the gas station." Rebecca felt a shiver run down her spine. A woman who said the boy's mother would come for him? That sounded too strange. Was someone watching her life all these years? Just then, a man in the back of the courtroom stood up abruptly. He wore a dark coat and sunglasses, his face half hidden. The bailiff turned toward him, but before anyone could speak, the man shouted, "This boy shouldn't be here." Chaos erupted. Reporters started shouting questions, the bailiff moved to stop the man, and Eli began to cry. The man tried to rush toward the judge's bench, but officers quickly grabbed him. As they dragged him away, he yelled, "You don't understand, Judge Miles. He was never supposed to find you." The room fell silent again, leaving everyone in shock. Rebecca's face turned pale. Her heart felt like it would burst out of her chest. The words echoed in her mind, "He was never supposed to find you." Who was that man? And how did he know the truth? As the officers took the man out, Eli looked up at the judge again, tears running down his cheeks. "Mom, please don't let them take me away again." Rebecca felt her whole world spin. Her mind said she had to stay professional. But her heart whispered, "He's your son." She leaned forward, her voice trembling, "Take the boy to protective custody. I'll handle this case personally." As the courtroom emptied, Rebecca sat alone, staring at the small red toy car on her desk. The name Rebecca still glimmered faintly under the light. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, "Oh God, what have I done?" Outside the courtroom, a storm began to rise. And somewhere deep within the shadows, the truth about Eli's past and Rebecca's hidden life was only beginning to surface. Judge Rebecca Miles couldn't sleep that night. The sound of rain against her window felt like whispers from the past, reminding her of the night she made the hardest decision of her life. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Eli's face, the same dark eyes, the same trembling lips, the same pain she once saw in her newborn baby before she left him behind. Her hands shook as she held the small red toy car again. She turned it over and saw the name Rebecca scratched under the paint, faint but still clear. There was no denying it anymore. That boy was her son. But how was it possible? How had he found her after all these years? And who was that man in the courtroom who shouted that Eli wasn't supposed to find her? Questions kept echoing in her mind, louder than the thunder outside. By morning, Rebecca was sitting at her office desk in the courthouse, her coffee untouched. She looked tired, but her mind was sharp. She had ordered the police to keep the boy under protection. No visitors. No phone calls. She needed to know who had been taking care of him all these years, and why he had suddenly appeared. Detective Harris, a middle-aged officer with a calm voice, entered the room. "Your Honor," he said, "we ran a background check on the boy. There's something strange. No birth certificate, no hospital record, no school files. It's like he didn't exist until 3 weeks ago." Rebecca frowned. "That's impossible. Someone must have taken care of him." "There was an old woman," Harris said. "The boy mentioned her. We found traces of her name in the house near where he was discovered. Her name was Martha Cole. But here's the problem, she died 2 months ago." Rebecca's heart sank. "Did she have any relatives?" "No, ma'am. She lived alone. Neighbors said she used to talk about a child she was protecting. Said he was not hers but chosen by fate. People thought she was losing her mind." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, staring at the wall. Chosen by fate. Those words sent chills down her spine. Why would an old woman call Eli that? And how did she know about Rebecca? Before she could ask more, a guard knocked on the door. Your Honor, the boy's asking to see you. Rebecca hesitated for a moment. Her professional side told her to stay distant, but her heart refused. She stood up and followed the guard to the small observation room. Eli sat there alone, swinging his legs nervously. When he saw her, his face lit up with a faint, uncertain smile. Hi, he said softly. Hi, Eli, Rebecca replied gently. She sat across from him, keeping her voice calm. How are you feeling? He shrugged. Better now. I had a bad dream. That man from yesterday, he was in it. Rebecca leaned forward. What did he say to you? Eli looked around nervously before whispering. He said they'll come for me. That I don't belong here. Rebecca's heart tightened. Who will come for you, Eli? He shook his head. I don't know. But he said my mom made a promise, and now they're angry. Rebecca froze. A promise? She had made no promise, except the one to herself, to forget. Unless someone else knew. Just then, Detective Harris entered with a file in his hand. Your Honor, we found something strange in the old woman's house. He placed the file on the table and opened it. Inside were photos, old, faded pictures of a young Rebecca holding a baby. Rebecca's breath caught. Where did these come from? They were hidden under a floorboard, Harris said. Looks like someone's been watching you for years. Eli looked at the pictures too. His small hand touched one where Rebecca was smiling, holding a newborn wrapped in a white blanket. That's me, he whispered. Rebecca's voice broke. Eli, where did you see these before? Martha showed me, he said. She said you'd come for me when I was ready. But she also said bad people didn't want that to happen. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Did she ever say who those people were? Before Eli could answer, the lights flickered. The guard at the door stepped outside to check, but a second later there was a loud bang from the hallway. The detective drew his gun. Stay here, he shouted and rushed out. Rebecca pulled Eli close, her heart pounding. She could hear footsteps, voices, and the sound of chaos. After a tense few seconds, the door burst open, and a masked man stood there, holding a gun. Don't move, he shouted. Rebecca froze. Eli clung to her tightly. The man stepped closer, pointing the gun directly at her. His voice was cold. You shouldn't have let the boy speak. Who are you? Rebecca demanded, her voice trembling but firm. The man didn't answer. Instead, he threw a small envelope on the table. You should have left the past buried, he said, then ran out as officers rushed in behind him. Harris came back seconds later, breathing heavily. He's gone. Slipped through the back exit. Rebecca opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an old photograph of a baby wrapped in the same white blanket from years ago. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "He belongs to them now." Eli looked up at her, frightened. Who are they, Mom? Rebecca couldn't answer. Her mind was spinning. Who would write something like that? And what did it mean that Eli belonged to them? The detective placed a hand on her shoulder. Your Honor, I think this is more than just a missing child case. Someone's been planning this for years. Rebecca nodded slowly, her voice low but filled with determination. Then we find out who, and why. As she left the room with Eli by her side, rain began to fall again outside the courthouse, just like it did years ago when she abandoned her baby. But this time, she swore to herself she wouldn't run. Not again. Yet deep inside, she knew the truth was much darker than she imagined. The past wasn't coming back by accident, it was being brought to her, piece by piece, by someone who knew everything. And whoever they were already watching. The next morning, Judge Rebecca Miles arrived at the courthouse before sunrise. Her mind had not rested all night. The words written on the back of that photograph, "He belongs to them now," kept echoing in her head. Every time she looked at Eli, she felt both love and fear. Love because she finally knew he was her son. Fear because someone dangerous clearly wanted him. The courthouse halls were empty. Only the echo of her footsteps followed her. She entered her office, locked the door, and opened the old envelope again. This time, she noticed something she had missed before, a small folded paper inside the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting were the words. The promise was made 20 years ago. You cannot break it. Rebecca felt cold all over. What promise? Who had written this? A knock on the door made her jump. Detective Harris entered, holding a folder and a serious look on his face. "Judge, I think we found something," he said. "What is it?" she asked quickly. "The man from yesterday, the one who shouted in court, his name is Daniel Cross. He used to work for a private adoption agency that shut down 20 years ago." Rebecca froze. 20 years ago, that was the same time she gave her baby away. Harris nodded. "I checked the records. That agency handled only one secret case that year. No birth certificate, no legal documents, just a payment, made under a false name. The child in that file matches Eli's age." Rebecca felt her chest tighten. "Do you have the name used for the payment?" Harris handed her the file. She opened it and stared at the words written in bold letters, Rebecca M. Her heart dropped. "That's me," she whispered. "Yes," said Harris. "And the person who arranged the adoption with you was Daniel Cross. The same man who shouted in your courtroom." Rebecca leaned back, her mind spinning. "He said Eli wasn't supposed to find me. That means he knows everything." "We're trying to locate him," Harris replied. "But it seems he vanished again after the courthouse incident. He's dangerous and well-connected." Before they could continue, a guard entered the room looking nervous. "Judge Miles, there's someone here asking to see you. She says she knows about the boy." Rebecca looked up sharply. "Who is she?" "She said her name is Martha Cole's sister, her name's Grace." Rebecca and Harris exchanged a quick glance. "Bring her in," Rebecca said. Moments later, an elderly woman entered the room, her hands trembling as she held a worn-out purse. Her face was tired, but her eyes were full of sadness. "Your Honor," she began softly, "I came because I believe you're in danger. And so is that child." Rebecca motioned for her to sit. "Please tell me what you know." Grace took a deep breath. "My sister, Martha, wasn't crazy like people said. She used to work for the same agency that arranged secret adoptions. But when she found out what they were really doing, she tried to stop them." "What were they doing?" Harris asked. Grace looked down. "They were selling children. Not for families, but for experiments, for powerful people who wanted children with special conditions." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "Experiments? What kind?" Grace shook her head. "I don't know the details. But Martha told me one thing before she died. She said there was a boy who didn't belong to them. A boy she had to protect. His name was Eli." Rebecca's heart pounded. "So Martha took Eli and hid him?" "Yes," Grace said. "She ran from them for years. She kept moving, changing towns, changing names. But they finally found her 2 months ago. I think they killed her." The room went silent. Rebecca felt a tear roll down her cheek. She finally understood why the old woman had risked everything. She was protecting her son. Grace opened her purse and pulled out a small silver locket. "Martha wanted you to have this," she said, handing it to Rebecca. Inside the locket was a picture, Rebecca as a teenager, holding her baby, and next to it, a strange symbol carved like an eye surrounded by flames. "What is this symbol?" Harris asked. Grace whispered, "It's their mark, the people who run the organization. They call themselves the Circle. Once you make a promise with them, there's no way out." Rebecca stared at the symbol. Her fingers shook. She remembered now. The night she gave her baby away, she wasn't just scared, she was pressured. A woman had approached her at the hospital, promising the child would be taken care of. That woman had worn the same pendant, the same burning eye symbol. "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered. "I made the promise." Before she could say more, her office phone rang. Harris picked it up, but no one spoke. Only a soft voice whispered on the other end, "Judge Miles, you broke the promise. Now we'll take him back." Then the line went dead. Rebecca's face turned pale. She looked at Harris. "They know where we are." "Get the boy," Harris ordered the guard immediately. But before the man could move, the lights flickered again, then went out completely. The hallway alarm began to blare. Rebecca stood up, her heart racing. She grabbed the locket and ran toward the security room with Harris and Grace following. When they reached the monitors, every screen showed the same thing, static, except one. In that one, they saw Eli's room. The boy was gone. Rebecca screamed, "Where is he? Find him!" The guard radioed his team, but there was no response. Harris ran toward the hallway, shouting orders. The power flickered back for a second, and a camera feed came alive, showing a black van speeding out of the back gate. Rebecca froze as she saw Eli's terrified face in the van window, pounding on the glass. "Eli," she shouted, running toward the exit, but the van disappeared into the storm. Harris caught up to her. "They've taken him." Rebecca's voice broke, filled with anger and pain. "They won't keep him. Not again." She clutched the locket in her hand, her knuckles white. The burning eye symbol glowed faintly under the lightning flash. She finally understood the truth. This wasn't just about her lost son, it was about a powerful group that had controlled her fate from the very beginning. As thunder rolled across the city, Rebecca swore she would find them, even if it meant tearing her whole world apart. And somewhere in the darkness, Eli sat in the back of that van, whispering softly through his tears, "Mom, please find me." The night was wild with thunder. Rain poured over the dark city as Judge Rebecca Miles stood outside the courthouse, staring at the empty street where the van had disappeared. Her coat was soaked, but she didn't care. Her heart ached with only one thought: they took him again. The boy she had lost once had been stolen from her a second time. Detective Harris placed a hand on her shoulder. "We've set up roadblocks. The police are searching every highway exit. We'll find him." Rebecca shook her head. "You don't understand, Harris. These people aren't ordinary criminals. They're professionals. They've been watching me for years." "Then we start watching them," Harris replied firmly. "They made a mistake taking your son. Now we use that to find them." Rebecca nodded slowly. Her fear was fading, replaced by determination. For the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking like a judge, she was thinking like a mother. Back at her office, she opened the silver locket Grace had given her. The strange burning eye symbol inside seemed to stare back at her. Beneath the tiny photograph, she noticed something new, a small engraved number. Number 1073. "What's this?" she murmured. Harris leaned closer. "A code, maybe? Or a file number." Grace, who had stayed behind, spoke softly. "That's not just a number. It's a location. The old agency used numbered houses to hide their work. Hashtag 1073, it was one of their safe sites outside the city. Martha told me about it once. A farmhouse in Blackwood County. Rebecca looked at Harris. Then that's where we start. Within an hour, they were on the road, Rebecca, Harris, and Grace, heading through the storm toward Blackwood County. The drive was silent except for the rain and the sound of Rebecca's shallow breathing. She kept thinking about Eli, his small hands, his frightened eyes. The last thing she saw was him pounding on the van window, calling her mom. She whispered to herself, "I won't lose him again." After 2 hours, they reached a lonely road surrounded by woods. There were no lights, no houses, just shadows and fog. Then, in the distance, they saw a faint glow. "There," Grace said, pointing. "That's the place." The car rolled slowly toward a large, abandoned farmhouse. The windows were broken, and vines crawled up the walls. It looked dead, yet there was something eerie about it. A single light flickered in the top window, like someone was waiting. Harris turned off the engine. "We go in quiet," he whispered, loading his gun. Rebecca nodded, gripping the locket in her hand. Grace stayed in the car, too weak to move fast. The rain had stopped now, but the silence felt heavier than before. They crept through the yard, stepping carefully over broken glass and wet leaves. The front door creaked as Harris pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something metallic. The floorboards groaned under their feet. They moved through dark hallways until they reached a room at the end. A single lamp glowed on a table, lighting up dozens of old files stacked in neat piles. Rebecca's name was written on one of them. She froze. "This is me," she whispered. Harris opened the file. Inside were photos of her from over the years, her at the courthouse, her home, even her wedding. Someone had been watching her every move. At the bottom of the folder was a small medical chart labeled Subject, Eli Miles. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Medical chart? What kind of experiments did they do? Before Harris could answer, a voice came from the shadows. "I warned you not to look for him, Rebecca." They both spun around. A tall man stepped out of the darkness, Daniel Cross, the same man who had shouted in the courtroom. His coat was dripping wet, and his eyes were filled with guilt and fear. Rebecca glared at him. "Where is my son?" Daniel raised his hands. "You don't understand. I didn't take him. I tried to protect him." Harris stepped closer. "Then who did?" Daniel hesitated, glancing nervously around the room. "The Circle," he said finally. "They control everything. You made a deal with them 20 years ago, Rebecca. When you gave up your baby, you gave them the right to use him. They never planned to give him a normal life." Rebecca's heart sank. "What did they do to him?" Daniel's voice cracked. "They've been experimenting on children with unique DNA, children born during certain storms, under rare conditions. Eli's one of them. His blood has something they call the key. That's why they want him back." Rebecca's mind spun. "You're saying my son is some kind of experiment?" "I'm saying he's the only one left who survived," Daniel said. "The others didn't." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Where is he now?" Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "They took him to their main facility. It's underground, hidden under the old Saintwood orphanage, just outside the city. If you want to save him, you have to go there tonight. Once morning comes, he'll be gone." Before Harris could question him further, a gunshot echoed through the room. Daniel fell to the floor, blood spreading across his chest. Rebecca screamed. Harris pulled his gun, scanning the darkness. From the hallway, footsteps approached, slow, heavy, deliberate. Then a woman's voice spoke coldly, "You shouldn't have come here, Judge Miles." A figure stepped into the light, a woman in a black coat, her face calm and sharp. Around her neck hung the same burning eye pendant from the locket. Rebecca whispered, "It's you. You were there the night I gave him up." The woman smiled faintly. You made a promise, remember? We protected you, we made you who you are. But you broke the rules. Rebecca's voice trembled with anger. You took my child. The woman tilted her head. He was never yours. He belongs to us now. Harris fired a warning shot, but the woman didn't flinch. Two armed men appeared behind her, forcing Rebecca and Harris to drop their weapons. Take her, the woman ordered. The circle wants her alive. As they dragged Rebecca toward the door, she shouted, You'll never get away with this. I'll find my son. The woman leaned close and whispered, You already have, Rebecca. He's waiting for you, where it all began. Then everything went dark as something hit the back of Rebecca's head. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer in the farmhouse. The room was small, cold, and filled with the sound of dripping water. Chains clinked softly nearby. She tried to move but realized her hands were tied. And then, through the shadows, she heard a small voice say, Mom? Rebecca turned toward the sound, her heart racing. Eli sat in the corner, scared and shivering. She wanted to run to him, to hold him, but heavy metal doors stood between them. Eli, she cried. I'm here, baby. I'm here. But before she could say another word, a speaker crackled to life above them. The same woman's cold voice echoed through the room. Welcome home, Judge Miles. The experiment begins now. Cold air filled the dark room. The smell of metal and damp concrete surrounded Rebecca Miles as she slowly opened her eyes. Her head ached where she had been struck, and the echo of the woman's voice, the experiment begins now, still rang in her ears. Her wrists were tied to a metal chair, and her body felt heavy and weak. In the dim light above her, she could barely see the shape of her son. Eli sat inside a small glass enclosure across the room, his face pale, his tiny hands pressed against the glass. Mom, he cried, his voice breaking. Please get me out. Rebecca's heart shattered. Eli, it's okay. I'm here, sweetheart. I'll get you out, I promise. A door opened behind her with a low hiss. Footsteps echoed on the cold floor. The same woman in the black coat entered, her silver pendant glimmering under the light. Her face was calm, almost emotionless, as she stopped in front of Rebecca. Still strong, she said softly. You always were. That's why we chose you. Rebecca glared at her. Chose me for what? To destroy my life? The woman smiled faintly. No, Judge Miles. To create something greater. You were never just a mother. You were part of a plan, a very old one. Rebecca struggled against the ropes. What plan? What are you talking about? The woman turned toward Eli's glass room. 20 years ago, a group of scientists working under our protection discovered something rare. Children born during certain electric storms carried a special gene. That gene allows their blood to regenerate cells faster than normal. It could cure diseases, maybe even stop aging. But the process wasn't stable. Rebecca's breath caught. You used babies for this? The woman's voice remained calm. We used donations. Mothers who gave their children up willingly. You were one of them. You signed the paper, Rebecca. You made the promise that your child would serve a greater purpose. Rebecca shook her head, tears burning in her eyes. I was scared. I didn't know what I was signing. I thought he'd go to a good family. The woman leaned closer, her eyes cold. Ignorance doesn't erase the deal. Eli belongs to us. His body holds what we need to finish our work. Rebecca's voice rose in anger. He's not your experiment, he's my son. The woman tilted her head slightly, studying Rebecca like a scientist observing a subject. You still don't understand, do you? The same blood that runs through his veins runs through yours. You carry the gene too. You are the key to stabilizing the formula. Rebecca froze. What? Yes, the woman said. Eli inherited it from you. That's why we've watched you all these years. You thought you became a judge because of your own effort? No, Rebecca. We guided your path. We made sure you reached power, protection, and respect. Because when the time came, we needed you ready. Rebecca felt the room spin. Everything she had worked for, everything she believed she earned, was controlled. She felt sick. You've been controlling my life? Every step, the woman said simply. And now, we need both of you. Together, you'll make history. Rebecca clenched her fists, anger replacing fear. You'll never get away with this. People know who I am. The police will find us. The woman smiled coldly. The police? Half of them work for us. Rebecca's heart sank. Then what do you want from me? The woman turned toward the glass enclosure. You'll cooperate. You'll help us extract what we need from your son. If you refuse, she paused, glancing at Eli, he won't survive. Eli pressed his hands against the glass, crying. Mom, don't let them hurt me. Rebecca's tears finally fell. Please, she whispered. He's just a child. The woman walked away. No, Rebecca. He's the future. Then she looked back. You have 1 hour to decide. When she left, the door locked behind her with a loud click. Rebecca sat still, shaking. She wanted to scream, to fight, to break the walls with her bare hands. But all she could do was look at her son. Mom, Eli said quietly through the glass, are we going to die? Rebecca forced a smile through her tears. No, baby. Not while I'm alive. She began tugging at the ropes on her wrists. The edges were rough and cut into her skin, but she didn't stop. She twisted and pulled until she felt something snap, the knot loosened slightly. At that moment, the lights flickered. A shadow moved near the control panel by the wall. Rebecca froze, ready to defend herself, but then she heard a whisper. Judge Miles. From behind a column stepped Detective Harris. His uniform was dirty, his face bruised, but he was alive. Harris! Rebecca whispered in shock. How did you get here? I followed the van, he said quietly. I lost them near the woods, but I found a service tunnel leading to this facility. I've been hiding ever since. He rushed to untie her hands. We don't have much time. I saw guards outside. They're preparing something in the lab next door. As soon as her hands were free, Rebecca stood and ran to Eli's enclosure. We need to break the glass. It's reinforced, Harris said, studying it. But maybe I can override the lock. He began typing rapidly on a small control panel beside the door. Sparks flew as he worked. Rebecca watched anxiously. Please hurry. The metal door clicked open with a loud hiss. Eli ran out and threw his arms around her. She held him tightly, kissing his hair. I've got you, baby. I've got you. But before they could escape, a loud alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed across the room. A robotic voice echoed, security breach detected. All personnel to containment area. They know we're out, Harris said. We need to move. Rebecca grabbed Eli's hand and followed Harris down a long corridor. The sound of boots echoed behind them, guards were coming. Harris fired a warning shot, hitting a light to distract them. They reached a heavy metal door marked Exit B3. Harris entered a code, but it didn't open. Damn it, they locked it from the control room. Then, suddenly, a voice came from the intercom. The same cold, female voice. You can't run from your destiny, Rebecca. The experiment must continue. Rebecca looked up at the camera and shouted, You'll have to kill me first. The voice laughed softly. Oh, we don't need to. You'll come back once you see what he can do. Rebecca frowned, confused. What she can do? Eli suddenly gasped, clutching his head. His eyes flickered strangely under the red light. For a moment, the air around him seemed to vibrate. The glass lights above them shattered, and the alarm system went silent. Rebecca froze in shock. Eli, what did you just do? The boy looked scared. I don't know. I just wanted the noise to stop. Harris stared at him, stunned. It's true. The gene, it's real. Rebecca didn't care what it meant. She grabbed her son's hand and pulled him toward the door. Come on. We're leaving. Using a fire extinguisher, Harris smashed the door control panel. The lock sparked, then released. The door opened, revealing a staircase leading upward. They ran through the dim tunnel, panting, their footsteps echoing. Behind them, the sound of boots and shouting grew closer. At the top of the stairs was another door. Rebecca pushed it open and was blinded by moonlight. They were outside. For a moment, she could breathe again. The cold night air hit her face like freedom. She hugged Eli tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. But then she heard the roar of engines. Black vans surrounded the hill. Bright lights flashed in their faces. Harris raised his gun, standing in front of them. Run, Judge. Take the boy and run. Rebecca grabbed Eli and sprinted into the woods as gunfire echoed behind them. The night swallowed their figures as the Circle's agents chased them through the dark forest. Rebecca didn't look back. She could only hear her son's voice, whispering through his tears, Mom, I'm scared. She held him closer and whispered, Don't be, sweetheart. We're going home. But deep inside, she knew, home no longer existed. And the real war had only just begun. The forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves under Rebecca's shoes and the faint, tired breaths of her son. The night was cold, the kind that seeps through skin and bone. A thin fog hung between the trees, turning every shadow into a threat. Rebecca held Eli's hand tightly as they pushed deeper into the woods. Her heart was still racing from the chase. Mom, Eli whispered, where are we going? Somewhere safe, she said softly, though she had no idea where that was. Every direction looked the same, endless darkness and tall, whispering trees. Behind them, faint echoes of shouting and dogs barking told her the agents were still close. She stopped for a moment, catching her breath, listening carefully. The sound was growing louder. Come on, she said, pulling Eli toward a small slope ahead. They slid down into a shallow ravine and crouched behind a fallen tree. Rebecca placed a finger to her lips. Quiet now. Eli nodded and pressed close to her. His small body trembled with fear, but there was something else in his eyes, confusion. He didn't understand what was happening, or why everyone seemed to want him. Rebecca watched the lights move between the trees. She heard radios crackling and boots hitting the ground. Then, silence. The lights faded, and only the sound of crickets returned. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe again. After several minutes, she helped Eli up. We have to keep moving. We can't stay here. Where's Detective Harris? Eli asked quietly. Rebecca hesitated. The last she saw of Harris, he was firing at the agents so she and Eli could escape. She wanted to tell Eli that Harris was fine, that he'd find them soon, but deep down, she wasn't sure. He'll meet us later, she said instead. He promised. They walked for what felt like hours. The forest seemed endless, but at last, they reached a dirt road. An old wooden sign read, Maple Creek, 3 miles. Rebecca looked up the road, her mind racing. Maple Creek. It was a small town she remembered from years ago, a quiet place near the lake. Maybe, just maybe, they could find shelter there. They started walking, the moonlight guiding their path. Eli kept glancing at his mother, his small face full of worry. "Mom, that woman said I have something inside me." "Is it true?" Rebecca sighed. "She was lying, baby. You're perfect just the way you are." "But I broke the lights," he said. "I didn't even touch them. I just thought about it." Rebecca froze. The memory flashed through her mind, the shattering lights, the silence that followed. She forced a calm smile. Maybe it was a coincidence. Eli looked down, unsure. It didn't feel like one. Before she could respond, headlights appeared in the distance. Rebecca quickly pulled Eli into the bushes. A black van drove past slowly, the same kind used by the circle. Her heart pounded as she held her breath. When it was gone, she whispered, "We're not safe yet." They finally reached Maple Creek just before dawn. The small town was quiet, its streets empty, the world still asleep. Rebecca guided Eli toward a gas station at the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed weakly. Inside, an old man sat behind the counter reading a newspaper. He looked up as they entered. "You two look like you've been through a storm." "Car broke down," Rebecca said quickly. "We've been walking all night." The man nodded sympathetically. "That's rough. There's a diner across the street, opens at 6. You can wait there." "You need a phone?" "Yes, please." He handed her an old cordless phone. Rebecca turned away so he couldn't see her trembling hands. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years, a woman named Sarah Klein, a journalist she once helped during a corruption case. After a few rings, a sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Sarah, it's me. Rebecca Miles." There was a pause. "Rebecca? Judge Miles? What's going on?" "It's 5 in the morning. I don't have time to explain everything," Rebecca said quickly. "I need your help. My son and we're being hunted. They're part of something called the Circle. They have power, money, connections." Sarah's tone changed instantly. "Where are you?" "Maple Creek," Rebecca whispered. "Near the old gas station." "Stay there," Sarah said. "I'm coming. But be careful. If this is the same group I've been investigating, they don't let people walk away alive." Rebecca hung up, her chest tight. Sarah was the only person she could trust now. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Mom, that man is looking at us." Rebecca turned. The old cashier was watching them closely. When their eyes met, he quickly looked down, but his hand moved under the counter. "Eli," she said quietly, "we're leaving." They slipped out of the gas station and hurried down a side street. Moments later, the black van from earlier turned the corner and stopped in front of the store. 2 men in dark suits stepped out. Rebecca grabbed Eli's hand and ran. They darted between houses, through backyards, until they found a small, abandoned cabin near the woods. The windows were broken, and the roof sagged, but it was shelter. They stepped inside, breathing hard. Rebecca closed the door and pushed an old shelf against it. "We'll rest here for a while." Eli sat on the floor, clutching his small backpack. "Mom, I'm scared." Rebecca knelt beside him. "I know, sweetheart. But you're brave, just like your dad was." Eli looked up. "Did he die because of them?" Rebecca hesitated. "Yes," she whispered. "They wanted him to stop asking questions." Suddenly, the air grew cold. Eli's eyes widened. "Mom, the lights." Rebecca turned. Every candle in the room flickered at once, then burst into flame, glowing brighter than before. The temperature dropped, and a strange hum filled the air. Eli clutched his head again. "It's happening again." Rebecca held his shoulders. "Look at me, Eli." Breathe. You can control it, okay? You're stronger than they think. The boy focused on her face, trembling. Slowly, the lights dimmed. The air returned to normal. Rebecca hugged him tightly. It's okay. It's over. But outside, unknown to them, a small drone hovered near the window, recording everything. Miles away, in a hidden facility, the woman in the black coat watched the live feed. Her lips curved into a satisfied smile. Good, she said softly. The boy is awakening. Now we can begin phase 2. She turned to a man standing beside her, a tall figure with cold blue eyes. Send the recovery team. Bring them both alive. The mother still doesn't understand how important she is. The man nodded silently and left the room. Back in the cabin, Rebecca didn't know that danger was already on its way. She sat beside her sleeping son, staring at the faint morning light creeping through the broken window. For the first time in years, she felt completely powerless. But deep inside, a fire was growing, a mother's fire. And she swore, no matter what it took, she would protect her son. Even if it meant facing the circle herself. Morning sunlight spilled through the broken cabin window, streaking across the dusty wooden floor. Rebecca sat against the wall, her son's head resting on her lap. For a few quiet minutes, everything felt still. But deep inside, her heart raced with the fear of what was coming next. Eli stirred in his sleep, his small hand clutching her sleeve. Rebecca brushed his hair gently, her mind heavy with the memories of the night before, the lights exploding, the chase through the forest, Harris's sacrifice. And the worst part, the woman's voice saying, "The boy is the future." Outside, birds chirped softly, masking the danger slowly closing in. Rebecca looked out the window, scanning the treeline. She thought about Sarah, the journalist who promised to come. "Please hurry," she whispered silently. Suddenly, she heard the crunch of gravel outside. Her body stiffened. She slowly moved Eli's head off her lap and crept toward the window. Through the shattered glass, she saw a black SUV parked near the trees. 2 men in dark tactical gear stepped out, moving silently. Her stomach twisted. "They found us." Rebecca rushed back to Eli and shook him gently. "Sweetheart, wake up." Eli rubbed his eyes. "Mom? What's wrong?" "We have to go. Now." He nodded, trusting her completely, even though he didn't understand. Rebecca grabbed her bag and looked toward the back of the cabin. There was an old, narrow door that led into a field. She opened it slowly, praying it wouldn't creak, but it did. The sound was small, but enough. One of the men outside turned his head sharply. "Someone's inside," he said into his radio. Rebecca's heart jumped. She pushed Eli through the door and whispered, "Run, baby. Run toward the trees." They sprinted across the overgrown field as the agents shouted and gave chase. Bullets hit the dirt nearby, but Rebecca didn't look back. She grabbed Eli's hand tighter, her lungs burning as they ran deeper into the woods. "Mom!" Eli cried, his voice shaking. "They're coming. Keep running. Don't stop." Suddenly, a black shape appeared ahead, another agent, stepping out from behind a tree, gun raised. "Stop!" he shouted. Before he could fire, the ground beneath his feet trembled. The man staggered, looking down in confusion, then the earth split open beneath him, swallowing him up to his knees. He screamed as he struggled to free himself. Eli stared, horrified. "I didn't mean to." Rebecca didn't waste a second. "Come on." She pulled him past the man and kept running. Behind them, the other agents were shouting in panic. They reached the edge of the woods, where an old dirt road curved toward town. A silver car was parked there, and beside it stood a familiar face. "Rebecca!" It was Sarah. She waved frantically. "Get in, now." Rebecca and Eli jumped into the back seat as Sarah hit the gas. The tires screeched, kicking up dust. Shots rang out behind them, but Sarah didn't slow down. "Who are those people?" she shouted over the sound of the engine. "The Circle," Rebecca said, panting. "They want Eli. They said he's part of some experiment, something to do with a gene." Sarah frowned. "Then it's true. I've been digging into their files for months. They've been running human trials under a project called Genesis. They believe they can create a new generation of enhanced humans, immune to disease, aging, even pain." Rebecca shook her head in disbelief. "That's insane." Sarah's voice dropped. "No. It's real. And they think your son is the key." Eli looked up, frightened. "Why me? I didn't do anything." Sarah glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Because you were born different, Eli. Your DNA is unique. They've been tracking children like you for years, but you're the first one who survived the mutation." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You mean, they've done this to other kids?" Sarah nodded grimly. "And none of them lived past 7. The Circle calls it purification. They believe your blood can complete the formula." Eli's voice was small. "They want to hurt me, don't they?" Rebecca turned and pulled him close. "They'll have to go through me first." Sarah drove for nearly an hour until they reached an abandoned church at the edge of the county. The place looked deserted, its tall steeple leaning slightly to one side. "This is my safe house," Sarah said, parking the car. "No one knows it exists. We'll be safe here for a while." Inside, the church smelled of old wood and dust. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting the walls in faded colors. For the first time in days, Rebecca allowed herself to breathe. Sarah handed her a small flash drive. "This has everything I've found on the Circle: names, dates, documents. Some of the people funding them are politicians, doctors, even judges." Rebecca frowned. "Judges?" Sarah nodded. "Including the one who approved your appointment 10 years ago." Rebecca froze. "You mean my mentor, Judge Atkins?" "Yes," Sarah said. "He's one of them. He's been part of the Circle since the beginning." Rebecca's hands trembled. "All this time? I thought he was helping me." Sarah looked at her firmly. "He was. Helping them get closer to you." The room fell silent. Rebecca sank onto a wooden pew, her heart heavy with betrayal. She had spent years believing she earned everything on her own, now she realized her entire career was part of their plan. Eli walked over and took her hand. "Mom, we'll stop them. I promise." Rebecca smiled weakly. "You sound just like your father." Before Sarah could speak, a loud boom shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. Sarah ran to the window. "They found us." Outside, black vans surrounded the church. Dozens of agents moved into position, weapons raised. Rebecca grabbed Eli and ducked behind the altar. "Sarah, there's a basement." Sarah nodded. "Go." "I'll hold them off." Rebecca hesitated. "No, I'm not leaving you." Sarah cut her off. "Rebecca, go. Protect your son." Tears filled Rebecca's eyes as she pulled Eli toward the stairs behind the altar. As they disappeared into the darkness below, gunfire erupted above them. The basement was cold and narrow, lined with old stone walls. Rebecca found an old service tunnel leading out. She pushed Eli inside. "Mom," Eli whispered, "what about Sarah?" Rebecca's voice trembled. "She's buying us time. We have to move." They crawled through the tunnel, hearing muffled explosions above. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a field behind the church. Smoke rose in the distance. Rebecca looked back once. The place that had given them brief safety was now burning. Then she saw movement. A man was walking toward them through the smoke, tall, calm, his face half lit by the fire. It was Judge Atkins. Rebecca froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Hello, Rebecca," he said quietly. "You've run long enough." Eli clung to her side, terrified. Rebecca stepped in front of her son, her voice trembling but strong. "You betrayed me." Atkins smiled coldly. "No, my dear. I gave you purpose. You just never understood it." He raised a small device in his hand, a black injector glowing faintly blue. "Come with me peacefully," he said, "and I'll let the boy live." Rebecca's heart pounded. She knew this was a lie. And for the first time, rage replaced her fear. "You'll never touch him." The wind began to pick up around them. Eli's eyes glowed faintly under the flickering firelight. The grass rippled like waves. Judge Atkins took a step back, his confidence fading. What is this?" Rebecca looked down at her son. "Eli, remember what I told you, you're stronger than you think." Eli clenched his fists. The ground trembled. A shockwave of energy burst from him, knocking Atkins backward. The injector flew from his hand, shattering on the ground. Rebecca grabbed Eli's hand. "Run!" As they disappeared into the smoke, Atkins slowly got to his feet, a look of both fear and fascination on his face. He pulled out his radio and said quietly, "The boy has awakened. Begin extraction phase immediately." Rain poured from the dark sky, washing the ashes of the burning church into the mud. Rebecca ran through the storm, her coat soaked, her hand gripping Eli's tightly. Thunder rolled across the horizon, echoing like a warning from the heavens. They had been running for hours. The forest felt endless, every flash of lightning revealing new shadows that looked like enemies. Eli's small legs struggled to keep up, but he refused to let go of his mother's hand. "Mom," he panted, "where are we going?" Rebecca glanced behind them, her eyes sharp, scanning for any sign of pursuit. "Somewhere they can't find us," she said, though she knew deep down, there was nowhere left to hide. They reached the edge of the woods where an old warehouse stood, half broken, surrounded by puddles and overgrown weeds. Rebecca pulled Eli inside. The large metal door screeched as she pushed it shut, echoing through the empty space. "Stay close," she whispered. Inside, the warehouse was dark except for the pale light slipping through holes in the roof. Old machines lay rusted and forgotten, covered in cobwebs. Rebecca led Eli to a corner behind a stack of crates. She crouched beside him, brushing his wet hair away from his forehead. "We'll rest here for a bit, okay?" Eli nodded, his lips trembling. "Mom, are we going to die?" Rebecca felt her heart twist. She cupped his face gently. "No. Not tonight. Not ever, if I can help it." For a moment, silence filled the space between them until a distant hum began to rise. It was faint at first, but growing louder. Rebecca's body stiffened. She knew that sound, the drones. "They've found us," she whispered. She pulled Eli to his feet and looked around desperately. There was a small staircase leading to the upper floor, where old offices once stood. She led him up quickly, hoping for a better vantage point. The hum became deafening. Through the broken window, Rebecca saw 3 black drones hovering in the rain, scanning the area with red beams of light. Then a new sound joined the storm, the low growl of engines. Black vans surrounded the warehouse. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "They're here." The front door exploded open, and a dozen agents in black tactical armor stormed in, shouting commands. Red laser dots scattered across the dark walls. Rebecca ducked and pulled Eli behind an overturned desk. "Stay down," she whispered. Boots thundered below them as the agents spread out. The sound of a megaphone followed, a voice she recognized instantly. Cold, commanding, and calm. Judge Miles, said the woman in the black coat, her voice echoing through the warehouse. It's over. You've run far enough. Hand over the boy, and no one else gets hurt. Rebecca clenched her fists. She's lying, she muttered. Eli looked up at her, his eyes wide. Mom, what do we do? Rebecca took a deep breath. We fight. They stayed hidden as the agents moved closer. One of them came up the stairs, sweeping his flashlight around. Rebecca waited, her pulse racing. As soon as he stepped past their hiding spot, she grabbed a metal pipe from the floor and struck him hard on the shoulder. The man fell with a grunt, and she kicked his weapon away. Run, Eli, she shouted. Eli bolted toward the far end of the upper floor as more agents rushed in. Rebecca fought off another, but there were too many. She grabbed Eli's hand again and climbed through a broken window onto a narrow ledge outside. Rain pounded their faces as they balanced above the drop. Below them, the woman in the black coat stepped out of one of the vans, watching calmly. Rebecca, she called. You can't win. The boy's power will consume him. Without us, he'll die. Rebecca's heart pounded. You're lying again. The woman smiled faintly. Am I? Haven't you noticed how weak he's become every time he uses it? Rebecca froze, glancing at Eli. His face was pale, his body trembling slightly. Eli, are you okay? He nodded weakly. Just tired, Mom. The woman's voice carried through the rain. Let us help him. Together, you can both survive. You can save him, Rebecca, if you stop fighting. Rebecca hesitated. For the first time, she felt doubt. What if they really were killing him by running? Then Eli looked at her, his voice trembling. Don't trust her, Mom. She's the reason Dad's gone. Rebecca's eyes hardened. The doubt vanished. You're right. Suddenly, lightning flashed, and the woman raised her hand. Take them, she commanded. Agents opened fire. Rebecca pulled Eli close, shielding him, but as the bullets flew, something impossible happened. Time seemed to stop. The rain froze midair, each droplet hanging like glass. The agents' movements slowed to nothing. Only Rebecca and Eli could move. Rebecca looked around in disbelief. Eli, what did you do? Eli stared at his hands, glowing faintly blue. I don't know, Mom. I just wanted it all to stop. Rebecca stood, stunned by the silence. She could hear her own heartbeat, and nothing else. Sweetheart, she said softly, we have to go before it wears off. They ran across the ledge, climbed down, and sprinted through the rain toward the back exit. The world around them still frozen, silent and unreal. But as they reached the edge of the field, time snapped back. A deafening crack split the air as thunder roared again. The drones swarmed above, flashing red. The woman in the coat turned sharply. There, she shouted. Don't let them escape. A shot rang out. Rebecca stumbled, the bullet grazing her arm. She fell to her knees. Mom! Eli cried, dropping beside her. I'm okay, she gasped, pressing her hand against the wound. Keep running. But he didn't move. He stood, tears mixing with the rain, staring at the agents closing in. Leave us alone, he screamed. The ground shook violently. The sky lit up with a blinding flash. Energy pulsed outward from the boy like a storm, hurling the vans aside and throwing the agents to the ground. Trees bent under the pressure. Rebecca shielded her eyes. Eli, stop. You'll hurt yourself. He looked back at her, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. I can't control it. Rebecca forced herself up and ran to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. Listen to me, baby. You're not a weapon. You're my son. And I love you. For a moment, the light around him flickered, then began to fade. The storm calmed. The drones dropped lifeless from the sky. Silence filled the air once again. Rebecca fell to the ground, holding Eli in her arms. He was unconscious but breathing. In the distance, the woman in the black coat stood watching, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she turned and spoke into her radio. "He's too powerful now. Retrieve the samples from the site and let them go." Her driver looked at her in surprise. "Let them go? After everything?" She gave a small, cold smile. "We already have what we need. The boy will come to us when it's time." Then she stepped into her car and disappeared into the storm. Rebecca carried Eli through the rain, away from the chaos, until she reached a quiet field under the dawn sky. The sun was rising, warm and golden, painting the world with light again. She laid him down gently, brushing his hair back. "You did it, sweetheart. You saved us." Eli opened his eyes weakly and smiled. "You're not mad?" Rebecca laughed softly through her tears. "Mad? No, baby. I'm proud." He smiled faintly and whispered, "I love you, Mom." She kissed his forehead. "I love you more." As the sun rose higher, Rebecca looked toward the horizon, where a new day began. She didn't know what the future held, or if the circle would return, but one thing was certain. She wasn't just a judge anymore. She was a mother who had faced the world's darkest secret and survived. And as long as she had her son, she had everything.